We're going to walk through the agenda in a moment. And before we do that, just a couple of housekeeping items here. So I will give you a brief introduction of who I am. So, so you've got that sort of orientation. And again, you're welcome to take notes if you'd like, but like I said, we've got the sign-in sheet, and if you'd like a copy of the slides, they're all yours, no worries there. What I'll try to do, again, in 50 minutes or less, I'm going to, about halfway through the training, I'm going to pause for questions. So there is a Q&A box. If you've been to other trainings, hopefully you've used them already. Use that for specific questions around the training that we can get to. We'll use the chat for interaction. I'll ask some questions and ask you to pop those in the chat. So we'll keep doing that. And then I'll also do some Q&A after the training has wrapped up. And if we don't get to all the questions within the time allotted, then I'd love to circle back with you via email. So if you are sensing that I'm not going to get to your question and you don't want me to miss out on that, again, sign in on that sheet and I will just take your question, find your email, and I'll follow up that way. And then here's an ask that I have for you, and that is I'd really like for you to center yourself in this training. And what I mean by that is this is your time. This is your time to listen, your time to learn, your time to engage with others, and ultimately, I hope, walk away from this training with greater clarity and understanding of how you can tell better stories when you're connecting with voters. Again, this is framed in such a way that you're here hopefully to learn how to improve your, not just your critical thinking skills, but really your communication skills when it comes to connecting with voters. And at the end of this training, what I'll do is also ask you to share one takeaway from what you've gained through this session. So maybe there's something surprising that stood out to you, or a nugget that offered more clarity, or even a tool that you want to take on as a next step to help improving your skills. So think about that as well in this training and what you can get out of it. This is, again, your time. I want to make the most of it. So without further ado, just a quick introduction. And before I get into, I guess, my background, I also want to introduce my colleague, my mentor, and my friend, Rashid. And Rashid's the one who's been handling the links for us. He's a really good friend of mine, and he's providing us with support on the back end, helping us with the Q&A and managing that sign-in sheet. So Rashid, thank you. I'm really glad that you're here this morning with me.
My pleasure, Michelle.
Yeah. In terms of just a quick introduction, I'm a cognitive psychologist. I've been doing this for a while, 20 years plus. My career started in academia. I was a professor, and I made a pivot in my career, and I've done a number of things. I've worked for the Office of Inspector General. I've been a grassroots nonprofit leader, and for the past 7 or so years, I've been working for a Fortune 50 company. And the common thread that that lines all this stuff up is my background in research and statistics. And so I've got, I think as an experimentalist, I think as a researcher, I think in terms of statistics, but the thing that is different across all these years is really the people. So early in my career, when I did the research that I did, I was really sharing that with other specialized folks. I mean, we were talking in very technical terms, but then you know what, when I changed and worked for the federal government, the reports that I wrote went to Congress. I had oversight of Medicare of all things, and I did research on Medicare Part B and evaluation and management services, and I had all the data. And that's, you know, we're talking about using supercomputers and having a lot of data to tell that story. And guess what? The story I was telling had to be said in such a way for Congress people and the Inspector General proper to understand, right? So I had to really think and shift my thinking in terms of how I was communicating to a different audience. And so, and that has persisted throughout the years. So when I'm talking to nonprofit, to folks in the nonprofit sector, how I'm communicating is different than how I'm talking to like the CFO and the CEO staff at the insurance company that I work at. So again, if you're interested in the communication skills, and that's what ultimately this is about, and you want to bring that into the fold when it comes to winning voters over, then this is the training for you. So I've taken all of my background and have applied it to helping progressive candidates win. That's my passion. Now, in terms of our agenda, this is what we're going to cover within the 50 minutes allotted. So I'm going to talk a little bit about shifting your thinking and what that means in terms of how you're using information and data to communicate what's important to voters. I want you to also walk away with a better understanding of knowing your audience. If you went to yesterday's training, we talked, the presenters talked a little bit about that. I want to build upon that. And also knowing your big idea. And really being able to communicate that, because gosh, you only have so much time in front of a voter, so you've really got to make that limited time impactful. And then finally, I'll touch on how to use data to win campaigns. So just to center our thinking here, if we can orient what we're doing, our immediate goal here is to win the campaign, right? So if you're on a campaign, you know, you want to be on that winning campaign and you're fighting to win, right? Well, here's the thing. The opponent also has that same goal, right? And so our challenge here is to use the resources that we have to outperform that opponent. And along the train, I'm going to share some personal stories, some examples that I have to illustrate how we use these techniques to win. And by the way, our opponent, he had outfunded us nearly 3-to-1. So money isn't everything, right? But if you can outperform and outwork and really connect with people, I think that gives you that competitive edge that perhaps money cannot buy. Okay, so let's talk about shifting your thinking. And what do I mean by that? So we've got to use our head to lead with our heart. And what I mean by that is shifting from that analytical thinking to more of a creative thinking mindset. And so listing a bunch of facts about a candidate is just not going to cut it, not anymore. So this whole idea that the data speaks for itself, that you've got the facts to prove a point, that's super cerebral. All I mean by that is like, that is really thinking about argument, logical, and trust me, you need all of that. But to say that your candidate is a mom, or your candidate is an attorney, or your candidate is a cancer survivor, or they are an entrepreneur, a neighborhood advocate, just to use those labels alone isn't sufficient. And so you've got to give those data, those facts, a voice. And you've got to turn those talking points, whatever those bullets may be, you've got to turn that into a narrative that will inspire people to take action. And again, when we're talking about a voter, the action that we want from that person is to go to the ballot box and to vote for our candidate, right? And so there's going to be a leap that goes from that data center, you know, from your head into the heart. And in terms of alignment, start thinking about that story as a way to connect people through their hearts. And that's what I loved when I was looking at your, when I asked you, like, what's your favorite story? I saw people say, you know, I love to tell stories that make people laugh. I love to tell stories that elicit an emotion. I don't even care what emotion, right? And so when you're talking about that story, okay, I didn't hear anyone say, you know, I love telling a story that's just got a ton of numbers in it. No one said that. So again, you know intuitively that you've got to be in that story mindset. You've got to be in that narrative mindset. And you've got to be able to take that leap with the data that you have in terms of making sense of the data and then making meaning. And that meaning comes in the story, okay? And so by all means, you've got to start with the facts, okay? So start with the data, but don't stop there. So the data, that this is all happening behind the scenes versus the story that you're telling. That's what's public facing. I'll say that's what you are presenting in front of the voter, whether that's in person or on social media or even on the phone, right? So that's the piece that you put up front. The homework, if you will, is taking all the facts that you have and then constructing that narrative. And I'll tell you what, I've literally heard candidates who just stay in the data lane. And I've literally heard candidates say just bullet points, child of immigrants, cancer, literally cancer survivor. I'm not making it up. And it's just like, okay, I mean, that's fine, but show me how I should care, okay? When you just leave it at the facts, what you're doing, whether it's I think it's unintentional. What you're doing is you're leaving it up to the voter to fill the gap for you. And what happens is they tell their own story, and their story may not even be the one that you're trying to tell them. So you've got to do that work up front and make that connection for them. And even in this training, I'm going to illustrate how to do that in a way that is effective for the voter. Now, I want to offer another shift here that we've got to make. And this is about the characters in your story, the people in your story, and who we're talking about here. Again, if you went to yesterday's training from Convey Communications, they talked a little bit about main characters in the story, right? And there's two that I'll offer here that's used a lot in storytelling. One is the hero, the other is a mentor. We're not going to talk about the villain today, so bear with me. But in terms of storytelling, when we think of a hero, we're talking about someone who is on a journey where there's usually some sort of challenge or obstacle that person has to overcome, right? And there's a transformation that happens along the way, okay? And here's the thing, they can't do it all by themselves. So they've got a mentor, a teacher, someone who has mastered the skill or the mindset that the hero is going to need. So as we think about this construct, the hero and the mentor, I'm going to share some examples. My personal favorite, and this is maybe dating myself, but I love The Matrix. And so this has a hero-mentor relationship between these two characters. Have y'all seen The Matrix? I mean, let me check in. No, wrong window. Chat. Just want to check in. Okay, cool. Okay, yes. Love it. Another one, there's tons of examples. Another one, I'm just going to offer two. The Karate Kid and Mr. Miyagi. So a classic from the 80s. Maybe I'm giving my age away. That's totally cool. But again, you've got someone here who is on a journey. They're facing some challenges. They need help. They get that guidance from someone else who helps them shift their own thinking, right? Develop their own skills to overcome those obstacles, right? Are there other stories? So I want you to think about, maybe your favorite TV show or movie or book. Are there other examples that come to mind that have this dynamic for you? Let's just in the chat, if you've got another example, go ahead and pop it in. I like to see what you're coming up with. Yes, Star Wars, absolutely. Yoda, Skywalker, for sure. Yeah, that's iconic. Star Trek, yes. I know. Where are they? Where are they? You know, I'm a twin mom of girl-boy twins, and I tell you, I want more of the women's stories coming through. How about Hunger Games? Would you buy Katniss and Haymitch, maybe? There might be some other ones. Okay, so we've got some great examples here. Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings. It goes on. This is part of our DNA as a human species. You know, this is part of how we're wired. And so maybe you're asking yourself, yes, thank you, Moana. What does this have to do with using data to tell stories? I think that's let's take that on as a question. So let's think about that. So data really are just information. And it's the information that we have that can be the tool that helps the hero get unstuck in their journey. So remember, I can't imagine watching a movie that has a hero that has totally figured it out from start to finish. I mean, what is that? It's not a good story, right? We need that challenge. Along the way, they get stuck. And so what gets them unstuck is having some type of information, right? And so I want to bring this back into campaign mode for a moment. So during a campaign, okay, who's the hero and who's the mentor? put that in the chat. I want you to think about that and just again, don't overthink it, but who do you think is the hero when it comes to the campaign? Okay. Michael says it's the voter. And so who's the mentor? There we go. Okay. So this might surprise some of you. Others, you got it right away. But in terms of shifting your thinking, what I'd like to invite you to do is to consider the voter as the hero. And why is that? So again, let's think about what the hero's doing here. The hero's the one that's on the journey. The hero, in this sense, is the one who's ultimately going to decide who they're going to support. And the campaign is the campaign, whether it's the volunteer or it's the candidate or it's a surrogate, it's anyone who's supporting that candidate. They are the mentors. And why are they the mentors? Well, they've got the tools, they have the insights to help the voter get unstuck, because the voter potentially, and I've knocked on over 4,000 doors, but like for this one candidate, I've knocked on thousands of doors for her. And I literally spoke to voters who were stuck. They couldn't decide, should I support this candidate or this other candidate, right? And so our goal here is to empower the hero, that is the voter, to go out and support our candidate. Okay, so it's a little bit of a shift in thinking here. So let me give you an example. So when I was helping my friend run for office, this was 3 years ago. This is when Stacey Abrams vacated her seat so that she could run for governor in Georgia. And my friend ran for the seat, and so did a lot of other people, but it really buckled down to two people, her and our competitor. Awesome candidates, I gotta say, both of them. And I literally was talking to voters who were saying, we have a good problem. That's what I heard. It's a good problem to have. And it's like, oh, why should I pick her over him? Like, they're both progressive. And they were right. They are. And so what did I hear? I heard that my hero, the voter, was stuck. They were stuck. They didn't know, should I support her or him? And so how did I get them unstuck? So as their mentor, and of course I didn't say it like that. I'm like, I'm your mentor. Of course not. But I understood the role that I was playing here. So first things first, with respect to helping the hero. One is showing empathy. Just acknowledging in terms of in terms of how these two candidates were wired. Yes, absolutely. They're going to vote very similarly. So you're right. But what was it that the voter was asking for in turn without expressing it fully? They were asking for help. They were asking for help in terms of getting unstuck. And so really the onus was on the campaign, on me as the volunteer and the surrogate, and other volunteers, to help the voter see how our candidate differed from our competitor. Okay, and so when there's that situation of similarity, we've got to find a way to show contrast, to show that difference, and do so in a meaningful way. And so one way that we did it was to use financial disclosure data. And this is publicly available information. It's all about how the campaigns are raising money and spending. And and I'll tell you what, I dug into those data, and it told a night and day story that really illustrated the difference between these two candidates. And it helped the voter, again, our hero, get unstuck in their thinking. And once they get unstuck, then they'll start leaning one way or another, okay? So here's the thing. I love data. It's my day job. I live and breathe it. But the voter, when you go knock, and again, bear with me, I know we're in COVID-19 and we're not really knocking on doors like we used to, but back in the day, when we did knock on these doors, you know that the voter is really not expecting you, right? So it's not like you're going to give them a dissertation of here's all the facts, right? This is all the insights that I have from the financial disclosure data. Not at all. No one wants to comb through that. So you've really got to understand your audience and tailor that message to them. So we're going to get into that in a moment, but I do want to pause right now and see if there's any questions from our attendees here. And Rashid, I'm going to check in with you to see if there's something coming up here. Oh, there's a question.
Yes, though it's probably worth reiterating. The question is, in an issue advocacy campaign, who would you consider to be the hero and the mentor?
Yeah, good question, Megan. And I would like to know a little bit more. Maybe you can give me a little bit more context, because I want to make sure I'm thinking about, oh, sorry, you moved the question. Maybe give me a little bit more context around the issue advocacy campaign. That would be helpful, because I don't want to steer you in the wrong direction. So I will say this as at a high level though, and I don't want to get too tripped up on terminology here, but when we think of the hero, we think of the decision maker, the person who's got to decide what they're going to do. And there's going to be some action involved. So the mentor, if you will, that mentor is someone that can provide some guidance, someone that can help that person make an informed decision. So in my day job, if you will, my hero, the people that I'm influencing, these are executives, right? These are people that I'm trying to steer in a particular way based on the data that I have, okay? Yeah, there we go, immigration advocacy, right. So again, thinking about who you're trying to influence, those targets, those are the heroes. And again, it's a shift in thinking. I think sometimes, you know, I think initially even myself was like, oh, well, isn't the candidate the hero, for example? It's like, not in the sense of having to make the decision, right? So the candidate is asking for support. So those who have to give the support, those are the ones that you're trying to make an impact on. They are the heroes. Okay, let's keep moving. And Megan, let's follow up if more clarity is needed there. But maybe the next section will also help. So the next section is on knowing your audience. Let me check the time. Oh, okay, I think we're doing okay. So far, so good. So here's the thing for the voter. Can you imagine like picking up the phone and you're on the line saying, hey, I need you to support my candidate. You know, that person wasn't expecting your call, or back in the day, the person wasn't expecting you to knock on their door, etc. You get the idea. So for the voter, you've got to get to the point, and we know this, right? So you might just have a minute to connect with the voter. And so if that's all you have, then the back end work really is going to matter. All that behind the scenes work, when you are sifting through the data, going through all the facts, trying to distill it, like you've got to do that legwork before you see that voter. Okay, so by the time you're in front of their face or on the phone with them, you've got to know what that narrative is, and it's got to be bite size, right? It can't be like, oh, let me let me show you my entire analysis that led me, you know, no. What's the bite-sized insight that will help move that person towards you, okay? So it's gotta be quick, it's gotta be super easy to understand in terms of the point that you're making. So one of the questions here is what moves your candidate? What moves the voter? What moves the voter towards your candidate, right? We want them to lean our way. And there's particular levers that we can pull and push in terms of driving voters to support us, okay, or the candidate. And so I want to talk about that because this can help you in making that leap. Remember, we talked about the leap you've got to make from the data to the story. You've got to do that homework. You've got to do that yourself. This is well worth the investment, I promise you, because this is how you can connect with voters. And when you make that connection, you win them over. And when you win enough of them over, you win the campaign. So here we go. These are 3 levers that I'm going to offer you. I promise you, you probably can think of some more levers, but just for the time that we have together, I'm going to touch on these 3 levers. So again, thinking about things that can move people. And again, when I think about the hero in the sense of the voter being stuck, You know, I don't want them to be stuck. I want them to be on my side. And so I'm thinking about how am I going to get you closer to me so that you're going to go out to vote for my candidate. So one is with respect to issues. And that is, and again, I'm just going to offer some illustrations here. So one is, you know, really driving up those shared values and those issues. Again, you got to move away from just a description about who you are. It's not enough to say, well, I'm a mom. There's a lot of moms out there, right? So what is it about you that makes you different than, say, another mom who might run for office, okay? So you've got to really identify where the voter and the candidate line up in terms of sharing that common perspective or that common ground versus, and this is what I would suggest drive down or do less of, excuse me, versus, come on, debate. And I got to tell you, I have seen this happen and it's not pretty. So when you find yourself in a situation where you're talking to the voter and now you're debating on issues, look, let's do this instead. Identify where there's a difference in perspective and respect it, okay? Listen and learn. Debate is, you've been in a debate, right? The debate is like you hear what the other person's saying, you're not speaking, you wait just so you can say what you want to say. It's not necessarily listening for understanding, it's listening to make a point. And if you're trying to get folks to come your way, debating is just not going to be that winning ticket, okay? Really listening and finding common ground and respecting where there are differences, because look, no one's going to agree on everything 100% of the time. It's not even remotely realistic. Another thing, as we get into the experience piece, you can drive up those relevant skills and show the voters how your experience has prepared you for the situation. And I say this, I say this because my friend who ran for office years ago, like her background was a little different. You know, when I look at the folks who tend to run for office, it seems like there's a lot of attorneys, for example, that run for office. She's not an attorney. She was in the nonprofit world. She was running a local grassroots nonprofit that I was her chair for. And so she had a strong case, and she made the case that her experience in the nonprofit sector has prepared her to be in the front lines at the state capitol. And she made the case for that. And she helped voters understand that connection. And that's, again, what matters, is forming that connection. Versus, can you imagine? Versus just sticking to the status quo. And as progressives, my goodness, I can't imagine this being helpful here. So we've got to think about ways in which we're fighting for people, making their lives better, right? And putting a strong case for that and being authentic about it. I think there's nothing worse than someone just placating and, you know, honestly, just not being genuine. Like, you've got to really know yourself and put yourself out there. And part of the work that we're doing here is really focusing on the structural changes, right? So what's your case around that? Again, if you're fighting for the status quo, I'm not sure what you're even doing at this conference, right? So we're all about, you know, making some significant changes. You've got to articulate that with the voter. And literally, I've heard voters say, because I was helping a candidate who was an immigration attorney, and she's a mom of 4 kids who went to public school. And those were the talking points that she had offered. I was working with what I had, okay? And I was talking to a voter, and he said, you know what, can I be honest with you, Michelle? And I said, yes, please. And he said, you know, if that's really her talking point, like, I'm not going to vote for her. You know, this is what really moves me. This is what he's telling me. He's like, I need to know that she's going to fight for, you know, minimum, the $15 minimum wage. I need to know that she's going to help millennials, because this is a boomer talking to me. He's like, I feel guilty. I feel guilty about how we have set up the younger generation. I need to know that she's going to fight for them. And that's what's going to move him, right? It wasn't, you know, just being yet another attorney, okay? So again, you got to really use the skills in a way that's connecting people. I'm going to talk about money next. Oh yeah. And so with respect to money, and I'm thinking in this sense about fundraising and your campaign, and really driving up accountability here. So showing voters that you're a responsible steward for taxpayer dollars, and using the budget that you're working with as you run that campaign as a proxy. You know, show them like this is foreshadowing how I would be using taxpayer money in office, okay, in an elected position, versus again, very similar idea, versus, you know, being that the campaign that's like flaunting all the money that they have and getting all the nice shiny things, right? So really driving down cost, and showing that you know how to stretch that dollar, versus really spending money either frivolously or heaven forbid unethically, right? I'm going to talk about the money as a lever, because again, I was using financial disclosure data to help tell a compelling story that really moved voters our way. So again, even though we were outraised and outspent almost 3 to 1, we're the ones that came out on top, because we did a better job connecting with voters and helping them understand how our candidate was going to really fight for them. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears one more time on you and focus on the big idea. And again, if you went to yesterday's training, this is just another build upon some of the framework that they shared yesterday. So as it relates to the big idea is a concept that includes two things. One is identifying your perspective, your point of view, and the other is knowing what's at stake. So what do I mean by that? So again, using data, right? Again, love data. You've got to use the data to your advantage. That is to gain a unique perspective that will drive action. Okay, so we really want people to move, and we want them to move to those ballot boxes. We want them to vote, okay? And then you've got to be able to identify what's at stake. And what I mean by that is identifying the gains and even the losses in terms of what voters have to win or lose if they are agreeing with your perspective or not, and being clear about what they're going to get from you, or what they will lose if they're not with you. Okay, so you got to have some skin in the game here, and the voter has to have some skin in the game. If it doesn't matter to them, they might not even bother showing up to vote, period. So we're trying to move them, we're trying to influence them, and we want them to vote for our candidate. So I want to pull this together for you. I want to give you an example. And again, hopefully this is some input here that you can apply in your work. So here's an example. And again, my friend who was outspent and out funded 3 to 1, as I looked through the financial disclosure data, I learned really quickly that we had a lot of community support. We actually had about the same number of donors as our competitor. It just so happens that our competitor's donors had deep pockets, ours didn't. Moreover, our supporters, the community support that we had, that's the thing, they lived in the district. And a lot of his folks did not. And so we were able to use those pieces of information to build a case around who the candidate is more likely to support and listen to. Okay, so I'll unpack that in a moment. But this is the particular point of view that we had based on the analysis from the financial disclosure data. And again, the action here is that voting behavior. Now, what's at stake? So here is the thing. And this was the question that I asked voters when I was knocking on doors. So when you start to lay out, and I'm not going to go into like the specifics in terms of the details with the analysis per se, but at a high level, this ultimately landed on who is this candidate beholden to? So looking at the financial disclosure data, looking at who's supporting this person now, is that support coming from the community or somewhere else? And if it's coming from somewhere else, where is it coming from? Is it a special interest group or people from your area? And so we were able to pull that together. And when you do, and like I said, a big idea is both things. It's the point of view and what's at stake. You've got to do that in one sentence. So pull that together, and in one sentence, and again, this isn't like verbatim, of course, I'm using the candidate's name, right? But a vote for my candidate ensures the community will be heard instead of special interest groups. And that was the key to getting voters unstuck. They started to see, like, you know what, they might be aligned, they might be super similar when it comes to policy, but wow, in terms of support, very different. And so, yeah, that was what we needed. That was the lever we pulled, not only to get them unstuck, but to lean our way, which is what we were really fighting for, right? So this is, of course, we don't have time, you know, with this training, we only have 10 minutes left. But this is a schematic of a worksheet in terms of how to craft your own big idea. So I'm going to offer this, I'm going to walk through it super high level. But you can literally take a single sheet of paper, and on one piece of paper, you can highlight these components. And the first component is identifying your audience. The second component is identifying what's at stake. And then that third piece is being able to articulate your big idea. So on a single page, if you were to, and you know what, I put it in verticals because of the slide, but like if I had a single sheet of paper, I'd do this, you know, carve out, excuse me, horizontally my 3 sections. Identify who's the primary groups that I'm after, the primary voters, because, you know, you're not talking to every single person in a district. You're identifying the target set of voters. What do they care about? And what action do they need to take, right? So really always thinking about what's going to move them. And then in terms of what's at stake, do you know, before you meet them, do you know what the benefits are if they agree with you? Or what are the risks if they don't? Are you clear enough about what those are so that you can articulate that for them? Again, this is our hero who's bound to get stuck somewhere along the way. Do we have the tools ready to go to help them get unstuck? And then in terms of that big idea, again, 3 things here. Articulate that point of view. You've got to know what that is. Convey what's at stake. And in 1 sentence, wrap it up. Put it together. And that is your big idea. And here's the thing. You may have multiple big ideas. So I don't want you to think like, oh, my campaign only has 1 big idea. No. You may have multiple big ideas, again, depending on the audience that you're targeting. So you've got to really put some thought and do your due diligence, craft that message before you connect with that person. Because like I said, you might only have a minute, and you don't want to squander that minute fumbling through random talking points, right? You really want to pull this one together. Okay, awesome. So again, this is for you as a to-do. I would invite you to really invest some time in getting that mental preparation ready to go before you talk to the voter. All right, let's keep moving. And this is going to be a really small section here, but using data to win. And again, I keep talking about the financial data that I use. It's not the only source. It's just a source that helped us get our hero unstuck. But here's the thing, whether it's financial disclosure data or anything else, you've got to let that data speak to you, right? And I do want to be clear about this. When we make that shift from data to story, it's not about making information up. Like you're not, when I say this is a creative process, it's not about, oh, let me create the numbers. Like, no. You're using the existing information, truthful information, validated information, and you're listening to it. You're letting it speak to you, okay? And so, like I said, we've talked a little bit about that money piece. I just want to show you a little bit more how I did it and the types of questions that I was asking and how probing and analyzing the data helped me listen to the data and learn from the data in terms of what those insights are. So this is literally I just blurred out the actual data points here, but this is some legit financial disclosure data. You see the breakout, you see the name, address, occupation, where they work, where they live. Like I said, it's publicly available. So like, even when I was talking to voters, I was telling them like, you can look this up, you know, you can run this analysis. I ran the analysis. This is what I learned. and empower the voter, right? And one of them, most people did not take me up on it, full disclosure, but one did, and he came back to me validating my analysis and saying, "You got my vote. I see it too. I see what you mean about that community support and how she has it, and I see something different with this other person, so I'm with you." But these are some of the questions that I was asking. And these are just a sample. This isn't, again, I asked a lot of questions, but just to kind of get the juices flowing here. One, where's this voter located? So when you start, again, in terms of that narrative and where that support is coming from, if there's going to be a bias, people are going to be, they want to know, like, do you have the support from people who live in this district for whom this representative is working for? Right? So are you pulling that one together for the voter? And that's a great way to identify the community support. The level of community support matters. It really did. Another thing that we asked was about the occupation. So again, to me, I was thinking about diversity, right? So, and this is about understanding, are there special interests, or do we have more of a representation of the community? And the community here is a mix. It's not just like one type of occupation. It's not just the attorneys, it's not just the doctors, but the teachers, the nurses, those working in retail, right? So it's saying we are able to demonstrate that we are, even now as we're running this campaign, we're doing it for the community and with the community, right? So we were able to make that case, and we had the data to support us. We're not making it up. It's not fiction. And then looking at the average donation amount. So again, identifying the small versus large donors, especially if you're running a grassroots campaign, which is what we were doing. Those small donors can be everything in terms of helping even a volunteer on the campaign. So it's not just spouting out facts and numbers here. It's also, how are we leveraging these data to help, again, run this campaign so that we're going to win it in the end. So let me say this. Yes, I do love data. And yes, this was a labor of love. So, accessing these data can be a headache. Getting the raw Excel files takes time. Coding the data, so I had to dummy code the occupation, had to dummy code the location. Are they in or out of the district? You can tell that I love my candidate, right? And so I'm more than happy to do that. And I recognize that these can be hurdles and roadblocks for a lot of people. And so for the past 3 or so years, Rashid and I have been working on this as a side project. Like, how do we create some sort of solution that makes it easier for people and voters? Because here I was talking to voters saying, you can look at this too. And yet a lot of people got lost. Like, where do I go? So we've been working on a project to help make this easy for people. This is just a screenshot of how we're able to take that same information and create a representation that's super easy to use. Like, you can just click on it and know exactly where the person's located. You don't have to run the analysis I was doing. So anyway, if that's of interest to you, by all means, let's talk later. But again, just trying to think, how do you empower the voter? How do you empower campaigns to do this in less time? Because look, I'll be up till midnight, but a lot of people are doing other things, right? Let me pause again, and we've got a couple minutes left here. So I want to check in to see if there's other questions before we wrap up.
Yeah, we've definitely got a few. I think the Ananda is that Toma. Please pardon me if I'm not reading that correctly, but I'm wondering about using data on funding for police versus community, healthcare, housing, human services, paint a better story. We're working to fund the police budget in SA. I'm guessing maybe that's San Antonio or South Africa, not sure. 479 million for public safety budget compared to 55 million combined for healthcare, housing, human services. Yet we are having trouble getting city legislators a good portion of our public on board.
Wow. Yeah. Let me, I'm looking at it myself. And I got to tell you, just like with the campaign, when you're thinking about these messages, it's not a one-time deal, right? And sometimes, to be honest with you, the work that we do takes a lot of effort, and you've got to take that long view. I know personally, I was working on the earned income tax credit here in Georgia. It's something that still hasn't passed. It's been, we've had teams working on it for well over 5 years. And it was an evolution. So like that first year, it was more about defining terms for the legislators. The second year was more about framing, getting them to understand, okay, how you can position this. The third year, unfortunately, got looped into like a flat tax thing, and it was dead on arrival at the last day of session. So I got to say, if part of it in terms of the work that we do here, some of it is thinking of it a bit as a marathon, not a sprint. Other parts too would be thinking about, again, that the audience, thinking about what makes that person tick. And sometimes when I get stuck trying to figure that out, I go back to, maybe I can just sit down and talk to that person, or what is it that they're reading or influenced by, or, you know, I'm looking on Google, like what do I know about this person? You might know everything about this person, but I would suggest that maybe there's something else to it, maybe. And I'd be open to thinking about like, okay, this is what we've covered. Are there any gaps? Is there something that we haven't explored yet? Is there something about this particular stakeholder group that we can connect with? And maybe it's a framing issue. Maybe we need to revisit what our big idea is. But what I will say to you, Ananda, is not to give up on it, right? Because these are issues that are absolutely worth fighting for. And I see, Tommy, you've got a question. I know we've got a wrap here. Yes, these tips absolutely translate to writing as well. This is not just limited to oral communication. I use this when I do research, whether it's communicating in a presentation or even in a report. So absolutely. So as we wrap up, I do appreciate the questions here and your engagement. As we wrap up, I'd like to ask if there's a takeaway, something that you got from the training today, and if so, feel free to share that. And again, we've got a link here to the slides. Would love to send this to you. Would love to continue the conversation. Maybe, Ananda, that's something that we could do together. I also provide my email address if you'd like to stay in touch. I've really enjoyed sharing this with you. There's more, of course, more learning always. But I hope this was a useful use of your time. And thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the NetRoots conference. Yes, Amanda, data's power. I love that. So cool. Yeah, great. Yay. Wonderful. All right. All right, Dee, I'm going to check in with you.
Yeah, I was going to close out per the instructions at 11:59. So definitely, you know, if you want to answer another question, or maybe we can close the session.
Okay.
But it was so well attended. I mean, 5 minutes before the session started, we thought it would be 5 people, but it was like over 70, I think 79 people.
Oh,
Yeah.
great. Good. I'm so glad to hear it. Yeah. And it would have been fine if it was 5. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I'm glad more people came, and it seemed like we had a few that enjoyed it. So yay, I feel good about it. I like that comment from Auntie. That's great. Great question, Yuling. I have not done a specific workshop on how to do the research, but I got to tell you, I'm inspired by your question, and I would love to host one. And if you think that there's an opportunity, gosh, let's connect, because yeah, that would be fun. Love to share insights and how to think critically, for sure, and how to help other people do that. Oh, okay. Awesome. Very good. Yeah, let's do it. Make it happen. Cool. Yeah. Oh, fun. I love that. Okay. Yeah, let's do it. Great. You know what? I didn't, I'm just looking now at the questions and maybe Andrew dropped off. And Andrew, if you're still there, I'd love to, I'll circle back if he's not there, but Andrew asked a really great question about, is there an example of a video or mailer that shows this story visually? And I do have examples, absolutely. And I'd be more than happy to share that. I'll do that along with the slides since I didn't get to it. Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, look, I want more progressive people to get elected. So whatever I can do to help make that happen, and let's do it together, then it's going to be a win-win situation. For sure. Yep. Okay, so with that, I think Dee, let's call it good. I'm going to stop sharing. And I think it'll be up to me, Dee, to leave this workshop. Or
No, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Michelle and Rashid. Take care.
Thanks. Have a good one, everyone.
Take care. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.